What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another episode of Just Jets. In today's episode, I want to take a deep dive into Aaron Glenn and Lance Newmark. As of recording this, at least right now, neither one of those guys have been hired, but that could change either late on Tuesday or into Wednesday. As you know, pods drop on Wednesday morning, but I thought it was worthwhile to record this and get out a deep dive into both those guys because it is trending in the direction that they are very, very likely to be the next general manager and head coach for the New York Jets. It could even be done on Tuesday, potentially. So again, there's a chance that maybe that's the hire becomes official on Tuesday night, which would be pretty cool. If we're on Talking Jets and that news breaks and happens live on the air, that'd be pretty fun. But wanted to go in deep on both of those guys because, again, it feels like that's the direction that it's going to go. Things could change, but we'll play it by ear. Lance Newmark, we'll start with the GM candidate. So this, to me, and I would say most people would tend to agree with this, but of the two, Lance Newmark feels very, it feels okay. I'm not overly excited about it. I don't think it's an absolutely horrible choice by any means, but we'll talk through both the positives and the negatives. And I guess I'll start more on the negative side and then work my way positive. With Newmark, he spent a long time in Detroit. 26 years he lasted in Detroit. And this past year, he was in Washington, his first year as an assistant GM. The negative with Newmark is that he spent a majority of the time that he spent in Detroit was really bad, that they didn't do anything of note in that time. And they've only started to become good over the last, we'll say, 3 years. Again, there was a lot of losing in Detroit, but it's not like he was necessarily the one making the decisions. He was never the GM. He worked his way up the ladder as a scout, and then a personnel guy, and then was able to oversee a lot of different areas. But unfortunately, that's the negative on him, is that he's been in that organization for such a long time, and they didn't really do a lot the first, what do you want to call it, 23, 24 years that he spent with the team. Now, on the more positive side with Newmark, which again, I think he's an okay hire. I don't think it's awesome. I don't think it's horrible. I'll say like on a grading scale, like a C. It's like okay. I like that he's worked his way up the ladder and served in various different roles. And something that skews it more positive for me is that he brings an analytics background to it. So obviously he is a scout, and if you've heard him speak, he will mention his scouting process, which he watches the tape first, grades them out on the tape, then after that dives into like how much they love football, or if there were any arrests or any character concerns. So there is a mix of both, I think, old school, like grinding the tape, and then also a mix of this new age analytical approach. And for me, I think that's something the Jets need to have, is balance. There's too much discourse, in my opinion, and a lot of it negative around what's better. Is it the analytics and the stats, or is it the eye test? And I think I fall somewhere in the middle on this one. Like, I think there's room for both. I think if you're just looking at it, going to be, I'm an old school football guy. Screw the nerds and their calculators and the glasses up in the booth. They don't know what they're doing. I think that's pretty short-sighted. Also, I think some of the stuff with analytics maybe goes a little bit too far and lacks some context, which is why football IQ and game feel, I think, matters. But you can't just, again, turn your nose up at it, because clearly it is something that was a major focus in Detroit over the last few years, and it's part of the reason why they're so successful. Look at Washington this year. They are an incredibly aggressive team on fourth down. It's worked wonders for them. Most of the teams that are left in the playoffs are very aggressive teams and utilize analytics. And again, I think it's an important thing to do. I'm not saying you go full Brandon Staley and never punt. Remember that when he was the Chargers head coach? He got a little too nuts with it. I think you could steer too far into it. But at the same time, I don't want to go full, Robert Saleh race to 20 or, Todd Bowles conservative punts down late in the game. It's, again, you got to find the right balance. And him being able to have that, I think, is what boosts him up a little bit in my grading of him, which, again, I think he would be an okay hire. There's some things that you can get excited about him, and there's some legitimate flaws. And I guess you can make that case with any one of these candidates. Then there's Aaron Glenn. And there's the discourse around Aaron Glenn the last couple days. It has been wild ever since the game on Saturday, especially where Detroit lost and the defense didn't play particularly well. The negative here is you're going to get oh, great, here's another defensive coach. He hasn't been a head coach before. And it's a valid concern because the Jets have gone down this road before and it hasn't worked. But I will reiterate that every individual is different. And his route, which we'll talk about in a second on the positive side, his route to becoming a head coach is very interesting. And, people point to the game where his defense in the playoffs really let down Detroit. I get it. There were a ton of injuries this year. I think they had upwards of 13 players out on their defense in that game. And the defense was never necessarily elite when he was there. This past year, they had some good numbers. They were great in the red zone. They were 7th in points allowed, which a top 10 unit is still, it's still a good team, but you can never be like, oh, the Lions, they had multiple years where they're a top 5 unit in the sport. They were never that. But you saw growth year over year. And in that final year, unfortunately, injuries began to take over, but there were still some positive signs of things that he was doing, I thought anyway. But we have no idea if he's going to be a good head coach or not because he's never done it before. And it is a defensive guy, which the Jets have, tended to lean on. And I get it. A lot of fans wanted an offensive candidate. And unfortunately, I don't think the Jets really interviewed too many quality offensive candidates. The ones that stood out to me were Joe Brady up in Buffalo and Josh McCown, I guess. But there's inherent risk with both of those guys, too, because then the flip side of the argument could be, is Joe Brady able to do it without Josh Allen? And Josh McCown's never even called plays before. So is that the guy that you want to hire as the head coach? So you could spin an argument, either a positive or negative, for just about each one of these guys. So I also don't get those who are a small fraction of the fan base, but you have people like almost actively rooting against Aaron Glenn, which is just so bizarre. So bizarre. Now, for me, on the positive side, is his leadership quality. And something that I keep saying is the Jets aren't hiring a defensive coordinator. They're hiring a leader. I think he possesses those traits to where it could potentially work out. He knows the market because he's a former player, and I'll link those two together. He played with the New York Jets. He was drafted by the Jets. He lived through the Kotite era and then saw when Bill Parcells got there how things have changed, and hopefully he's picked up something from Parcells, who he played for twice. He also played for him in Dallas and played for a lot of good coaches throughout his career. Scouting background, too, is unique. It's very rare that you see that from a head coach. His first year in the league, or first couple years in the league, getting back into it after retiring. He was an area scout with the Jets. He was on the road, so he has that aspect of it. He is praised kind of being a CEO style of head coach, and we won't know that, obviously, until we see it come to fruition. And he's here, but I hope that's something that he stays true to, because that would list as a positive for me. The players on the Jets want him. Jermaine Johnson, I believe Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner. There's been a lot of hints around Aaron Glenn and the Jets wanting Aaron Glenn to be the next head coach. And the last thing for me on this is they would need to hire a good offensive staff around him. But some of the names that have been linked to him, and again, this is, recording this on Tuesday evening now, I think that Clint Kubiak would be the potential best hire for the Jets as an offensive coordinator. That's a name that they've been linked to. And Steve Wilks as a defensive coordinator, as a veteran DC who has some experience as a head coach. Granted, he wasn't phenomenal as a head coach, but I think he is someone who you could maybe lean on in those circumstances where you're a first-time head coach and need some advice. They'd use 4-down linemen, which I think is imperative to what the Jets need to do with how their roster is currently constructed. They would likely overhaul the back end of their defense, meaning the safety room, which I think is needed. They'll play more man coverage, which I think bodes well for Sauce Gardner. And they'll be more likely to blitz and be a little bit more aggressive. And, you know, Glenn coming from Detroit and seeing the success that Dan Campbell's had, I hope that he is also aggressive and also leans into the analytics a little bit as well. So, again, for both of these guys, I think you could come up with some negatives and things that, you know, are maybe turnoffs for you, but I also think that you can find the positive there. I am more optimistic about Aaron Glenn than I am Newmark. I guess I'd give Glenn like a B plus in that range. And, you know, for the people that they've talked to and interviewed, I think you can get behind an Aaron Glenn with someone like a Clint Kubiak at OC and someone like Steve Wilks on the defensive coordinator side. And at least with all his stops around the NFL and all the, the people that he either played for or coached with, I think he could build out a good staff, which, as we know, is very, very important. All right, let's get into your voicemails. We will start off with Max from New Jersey, who wants to talk about some of the candidates and who he likes and doesn't like.
This is Max from home to New Jersey, and I want to talk about the Brian Flores situation. So the Jets just interviewed Brian Flores, and I do not want the Jets to hire Brian Flores. And here are the main two reasons why I do not want the Jets to hire Brian Flores. So I'm not saying Brian Flores is a bad coach. So the positives, he is good discipline. I mean, his players are his teams are the least penalized in the NFL. He's very good on the defense, but here are my two concerns with him. So, and I hope he learned those of Minnesota. So, my two concerns. So, he was very demeaning towards Tua Tagovailoa. Like, he was not very motivating. He demeans him. He was saying demeaning comments about Tua because, you know, I understand if you didn't want a player, but you shouldn't demean your players in front of, like, you shouldn't demean your quarterback. He was saying, like, really roots up to Tua, and then Tua didn't really like it. And then after Brian Flores left Miami, Tua had, like, the three best years of his career. So, and my second point concern is offensive coordinator. I feel like Brian Flores is kind of like Robert Saleh 2.0. And the reason that is that he had 4 offensive coordinators in Miami, and he never had a good offense. Like, he had Shane Gailey in 2020. Then he had two co-offensive coordinators in 2021. And I hope he learned this with the Vikings. Like, I hope he takes the Josh McCown as a coordinator, but I feel like if you hire Brian Flores, you're basically hire Robert Saleh 2.0 because you can't get a good offensive coordinator, and he also rubs a lot of people the wrong way. So even though there are positives of Brian Flores, I just do not think the Jets should take a risk and hire Brian Flores. Instead, I feel like the Jets should either hire Aaron Glenn because Aaron Glenn's a former player and he has ties and I feel like Aaron Glenn would be a better fit. What's your thoughts on this and go, Jeff?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more positive on Brian Flores than you are. I thought he did a pretty good job in Miami, all things considered. I thought they overachieved in each of his 3 seasons there. The Tua criticism is valid. The offensive coordinator concerns is also valid. And on Aaron Glenn, I feel like that's likely going to be the hire here, and it's going to be dependent on what kind of staff he could put together. And some of the names that have been tossed around, there's, I think, some things to get excited about. I think there's, some legit candidates, and they have a chance to build a much improved offensive staff than what they had during the last regime, which is super important. Let's go to Phil up next. He's in North Carolina, wants to talk about a quarterback target.
Hey, Matt. It's Phil calling from North Carolina. I was just calling to see what your thoughts on bringing in Hendon Hooker from the Detroit Lions for competition with Tyrod Taylor. Let me know your thoughts. All right, thanks. Bye.
I appreciate the call, Phil. Hendon Hooker, I wasn't a huge fan of when he was coming out of the draft. just because he was an older prospect and had some injuries in his collegiate career, I don't think we've seen enough of him in Detroit. He's only played a couple of preseason games, I believe, this year in his second year in Detroit. I wouldn't look to give up any draft assets for him. Not that it would cost you a whole lot to probably trade for Hendon Hooker, but I don't see it. I believe he's already 27 years old, too, which, like, if you're going to take a shot on someone, he's 27 years old, which I don't know how much more developing is left at that age. Sure, who knows? Maybe, we see guys become late bloomers in their career. That's not a route that I would go personally. Let's do James from New Jersey wants to get into favorite candidates.
Hey, what's up, Matty Ice? James from Brick, New Jersey, weighing in on the GM and the head coaching search. Just wanted to throw out a couple of my favorite candidates for the job. For the GMs, I like Gain from Buffalo. I'm a fan of Lou Riddick. I think that he's a football guy. He's got a lot of knowledge, and I think that could be a good pairing for the Jets. I also like Thomas Dimitroff from the Falcons. I like his resume. As far as the head coaches, I like Glenn. I like Joe Brady. I like Flores. An underrated pairing for me would be Gain and Brady, plus both of them from the Bills. They already have that connection, and I think it'd make for a really interesting, heated rivalry in the future between the Jets and the Bills. So let me know your thoughts out of those guys, if you like any of them. If I had to take my guess, I would probably say I think Glenn's going to be the coach.
I agree.
The GM I'm not as sure on, but I have to predict Glenn for the head coach. But definitely a combo to look out for would be Joe Brady and Gain from Buffalo. So let me know your thoughts on that. Thanks, Matt. Bye.
Yeah, on Joe Brady, just because Newmark and Glenn are the only ones so far who has gotten second interviews, and again, it's trending towards both those guys being the hire. But on Joe Brady, I like him. He was one of my top 4 candidates, I would say. I was Vrabel in no order, but just based off memory, Vrabel, Glenn, Flores, and Brady were the ones that I was most interested in, and names that they were, actually looking to talk to. That would have been an intriguing route to go. Gain only had 1 year as the GM in Houston before he lost a power struggle to Bill O'Brien. So I feel like he didn't have a first or a second round pick because of the Deshaun Watson trade a year ago. So I feel like it's really hard to judge the job that he did there. But I would have been good with that. I think it would have been an exciting upside type of hire. Let's go out to Rez in PA who wants to talk some Aaron Glenn.
Hey, what's up, Matt? It's Rez from PA. Man, I pumped for this hiring cycle, man. Really hoping we get it right. At this point, I think it's Aaron Glenn, which I have no problem with at all. I'm absolutely, I mean, all the chatter and stuff about whatever happened in the playoffs, it's the playoffs. And it's football. Things happen. But Aaron Glenn for sure. And it's pretty interesting because obviously we had a very trying season, to say the best.
That's putting it nice.
I was looking when we were doing the whole GM coach search. I was trying to read the tea leaves, I believe it's Ray Farmer we interviewed at the beginning. Ray Farmer was the GM of the Browns in 2014. That's the Mike Pettin roster where they had Kyle Shanahan as the OC. They didn't fire him. He walked, and then they brought in DeFilippo, who eventually was on Pedersen's coaching staff into the following season for the Eagles. Anyways, the point was that Aaron Glenn was part of that coaching staff, so it was kind of like an indicator that none of us were paying attention because we were so miserable. But I wanted to ask you off that coaching staff, there were a couple of things that I noticed, and one of them was Brian Angelicio, I think his name is. He's the pass game coordinator of the Vikings. And, of course, Mike Pettin, he's the linebackers coach on the Vikings. So I was wondering, how would you feel, like, getting that guy over here to be our OC with the hearsay about McCown wanting to be a head coach right away and not an OC? Would you take a gamble with that? Let me know. Thanks for your time, Matt. Go Jets.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about him. He's been mostly a tight end coach throughout Angelico, at least in his career. He was with Tampa Bay in 2012, then Cleveland, then Green Bay, then Washington, then Carolina, and then in Minnesota since 2022 and has been their pass game coordinator. I think that's an interesting outside of the box thought. And maybe if the Jets were going the Flores route, that would be someone that he'd bring with him. I don't know if he has any sort of connection to Aaron Glenn. It doesn't look like it based on, the stops that he's had, unless he was the tight ends coach when Aaron Glenn was a assistant defensive backs coach. So maybe you're onto something there. Maybe. I don't think it's a horrible thought. Again, he hasn't called plays yet before, but has had success as a pass game coordinator. I think we could all agree that Minnesota's passing offense has been pretty solid, from the Kirk Cousins era, then even into the Sam Darnold era this past year. So I like it. I think that's an interesting thought. Not a name that I've seen a lot of people talk about yet, but we'll see. Maybe they do a hire that hasn't been mentioned yet, and that would be a guy who I think fits the bill. Peter from Hudson Valley, what do you got?
Hey, Matt. It's Peter calling from up in the beautiful Hudson Valley on this Monday evening. Calling about the latest in the Jets GM and head coach search updates. Seeing the reports coming out by yourself and others that Aaron Glenn is going to get a second interview. Good thing there. We're finally getting around to that. Needed to move forward past these 30-some other guys in both positions so we can finally get the ball rolling on this, especially now with the news that came out late today that Ben Johnson has decided to go to the Bears. Not a bad idea for him to coach up Caleb Williams. Obviously, the Bears need someone to get that offense going. Anyway, on the Jets side of things, if it winds up being Glenn, and also I guess the rumors about Lance Newmark coming over from the Commanders, even though he had a lot of time with Detroit as well, that sounds like the direction the Jets may be going in. And kind of what I was going to talk about is I think that they were going to make both announcements kind of simultaneously between head coach and GM, and not just say coach first and then GM or vice versa. It sounds like it's going to be a pairing type thing. Thank you again for the shout out last week on Talking Jets with the thoughts about Mike Zimmer.
Yes.
Possibly being defensive coordinator under Glenn. If, let's say, it doesn't wind up being McCown possibly coming as well as offensive coordinator, because it seems like he might want to actually just go all the way to head coach. Do you have any other thoughts on who might be Glenn's offensive coordinator? I know there was other names mentioned, but I cannot remember who they are right now. So obviously we want still someone strong on the offensive side as well to get things going there. So that's my question for this week. If it sounds like it, I am a little under the weather.
Feel better.
Hopefully I will start feeling better. And I just wanted to shout you out as well for the teaching gig. Good luck with that this spring semester.
Thank you.
And as always, go Jets.
Yeah, I am excited to get into it, and I'm hoping that there's no announcement on the Jets head coach tomorrow between 9:30 and 12:30. I'll be a little busy during the morning tomorrow, so if they want to get this, or on Wednesday when you're listening to this, if they want to get that out of the way on Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon, that would be preferred. So some names to keep in mind for the Jets, what we've seen so far. Clint Kubiak has been one. Scott Turner and Nick Caley are other names. So Clint Kubiak has spent 2 seasons as a offensive coordinator, not consecutive. He was the OC in 2021 for the Minnesota Vikings. They were 12th in yards and 14th in points. And this past year in New Orleans, they were 21st and 24th in points, which clearly, like, that's no one's, going nuts over that. But they got 10 games of Derek Carr, 6 of Spencer Rattler, and a Jake Haener start in there. So it's not like he was working with, the best of the groups, but obviously his dad was a very successful offensive coach in this league. He was a Denver Broncos pass game coordinator in 2022 as well, a quarterbacks coach in 2019 and 20 with Minnesota, the pass game coordinator in 2023 with the 49ers before getting the job this go around in 2024 with the New Orleans Saints. That name, I think, excites me the most out of this list. As for Nick Caley, he's was a long time in New England, has not been a play caller yet, but that's someone who I think is going to get the play calling duty soon. He was a tight ends coach from 2017 to 19. Then a tight ends and fullbacks coach, tight ends coach with the Rams in 23. And then this past year had a promotion, was the tight ends coach as well as the pass game coordinator with the Rams. So after a couple years with McVay, maybe Nick Caley is ready to make that jump. And then Scott Turner is another name that is in the mix here as well. He was with Washington this past year. No, I'm sorry. He was the offensive coordinator from 2020 to 2022. He was the pass game coordinator and the interim OC with Vegas. Also a Vikings quarterback coach from 2014 to 2016. He was the quarterback coach in Carolina from 2018 to 19. That one doesn't move me as much. I would probably go Kubiak, Caley, and then Turner in that order. But those are the names right now that have been mentioned the most. Okay. I'm getting notifications. I have my noties on for Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. So I just had to check, and Kevin O'Connell has reached a contract extension. But I got the buzz went off twice in a row, and I was like, what is that? Is it the Aaron Glenn news? One more call. We'll go out to PG from Long Island, who wants to talk the search as well.
Hello, Matt O'Leary. PG from Long Island here. Thank you for taking my call. I'm looking at this offseason, and I'm thinking paralysis by analysis. I mean, what are the Jets doing? Do you really need to interview the janitor? We had a head start, but we let Tennessee come in and hire what is consensus the best, GM candidate out there. Now, no guarantee he's going to be great, but he did seem to have the best resume, the best background. As far as head coach, I'll be very disappointed if we do not hire Aaron Glenn. There's a podcast out there, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Scott Mason does Play Like a Jet.
Yep.
He's been doing a very nice job of taking all of these coach and GM candidates and talking to somebody from that city where he played, whether it was played or was GM or whatever, and whether it was a content creator or possibly a beat reporter. And I tell you what, both the guy in New Orleans and the guy in Detroit, Aaron Glenn is a real leader. He's smart. You see where he's been under the tutelage of Parcells. In fact, he became a scout because Parcells said, if you're going to be a head coach someday, you need to be a scout now. Flores, not such a good flattering report. I think he has problems playing well with others, starts to fight in the sandbox. He might not survive that well in New York. So I really would rather not see him. I just don't think that's going to work out. Want Aaron Glenn. I also think if we can't get Aaron Glenn, then the other guy would be the other former quarterback from New York, whose name has escaped from me right now, McGowan. But I know he hasn't had that much experience, but I think he just as a leader of men, he would be successful. Last thing is, why is 33rd team looking at so many people? Are they trying to expand their contact base and, get that network together. It just doesn't make sense. But anyway, your thoughts on that, please, Matt O'Leary. And as always, go Jets.
Thank you so much, PG. I am similar to the first call from Max. I think I'm a little bit more optimistic about Flores the second go around, but valid concerns to bring up about his first stint with the Miami Dolphins. On Aaron Glenn, the thing that I'm hoping to see most from him is his understanding of New York and what it takes to win here and be successful here. You know, he saw Bill Parcells come in and really change the culture. And just anytime he speaks, I think he has a different attitude than Saleh. I know a lot of people go, oh, defensive coordinator, first-time head coach Robert Saleh. It's a repeat. Personalities seem a little bit different to me. Saleh seemed much more reserved and buddy-buddy with his guys, where Glenn is a little bit more intense, I think is the word that I would use. And I think that the Jets need some of that intensity. So I would be excited about a Glenn hire, and I think it's going to be coming very, very soon. So I'll leave you with that. Guys, thank you to everyone who called in. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you are new to the show, and I'll catch you next time.